Welcome to the top 10 games of 1983 as voted on by, well, myself. Please feel free to share in the comments your top 10 games of 1983. Without further ado, let's get on with the countdown. Number 10, Hover Bother, Commodore 64. Written by Jeff Minter and published by Llamasoft, you play the part of Gordon Bennett who needs to mow lawns but requires a lawnmower, so he steals, or borrows, a lawnmower from his neighbours. The object of the game is to mow the grass and avoid the neighbour, the dog and the flowers. If you hit the flowers, you'll also be chased by the angry owner of the garden. Gordon is chased by the neighbour whose lawnmower he steals. If he catches you, he will steal it back and the player loses a life. Gordon's only weapon is his dog. By hitting the fire button, the player can set the dog on the neighbour or gardener. This causes them to run away or freeze in place. The amount of time for which this can be done is limited, displayed as dog loyalty meter. Once the dog tolerance meter runs out, he will also chase Gordon and cause him to be stunned if he catches him. You get 3 lives or neighbours, Jim, Tom and Alf. This game was completely bonkers, but a great deal of fun to play. Number 9, The Hobbit, Commodore 64. Developed by Beam Software and published by Melbourne House and written by Veronica Megler, based on the book by J.R.R. Tolkien. A copy of the Hobbit book was also included with every game sold. An illustrated text adventure game with a huge vocabulary. Players would type commands such as pick up sword or talk to Gandalf, or if they wanted to move, a compass direction would be typed in, for example, north, east, etc. The game has a cast of non-player characters or NPCs entirely dependent of the player and bound to precisely the same game rules as the player. The game follows the events of the book closely. The volatility of the characters, coupled with rich physics and impossible to predict fighting system, enabled the game to be played in many different ways. The game might be regarded as one of the first examples of emergent gameplay. This also, however, resulted in many bugs. For example, during the development, it was found that the animal NPCs killed each other before the player arrived. Melbourne House issued a version 1.1 with some fixes, but with another bug that resulted in the game being unwinnable, it was forced to release version 1.2. The company never fixed all the bugs. The game won the 1983 Golden Joystick Award for Best Strategy Game. The game was also a huge commercial success, selling over 100,000 copies in its first 2 years at a retail price of £14.95. Number 8, Falcon Patrol, Commodore 64. Programmed by Steve Lee and released by Virgin Games, Falcon Patrol is a side-scrolling two-way shooter much in the same style as the coin-op classic Defender. You are the last surviving member of the Falcon Patrol Squadron and your mission is to defend the city from wave after wave of fighters. The player must also prevent bombers from destroying the 6 airfields upon which you need to constantly refuel your plane. You get 3 lives and an extra one at 3,000 points. There's a radar at the bottom of the screen showing the position of enemy fighters. A simple but fun shoot 'em up game, Falcon Patrol is a true classic. Number 7, Ant Attack ZX Spectrum. Ant Attack is a ZX Spectrum computer game developed by Sandy White and published by Quicksilver. Widely considered to be the first ever isometric 3D game made for personal computers. Player controls either a boy or a girl, then they enter the city filled with ants and attempt to rescue a hostage. The ants will bite players and can only be destroyed with grenades. You can climb onto structures in order to stay out of the reach of the ants. Once the hostage is rescued, the game will restart with a new hostage located in a harder to reach part of the city. Ant Attack was a classic in its time and was nominated for a 1983 Golden Joystick Award, finishing runner-up to Imagine Software's R-Diddums. Number 6, Panic 64, Commodore 64. Coded by Ian Gray for Interceptor Software, it's a clone of the arcade game Space Panic. You're armed with bombs and have to run up and down ladders, avoiding the blob-like monsters. The object of each level is simple: destroy the monsters either by blowing them up directly or blowing holes in the floors and leading the monsters through the holes and dropping them. Later levels require you to drop the monsters from higher heights to kill them. Panic 64 is a simple but fun platform game. Number 5, Jetpack ZX Spectrum. Written by Chris Stamper with graphics designed by Tim Stamper for Ultimate Play the Game label. The game world consists of 3 platforms which Jetman can manoeuvre onto. Jetman must assemble his rocket, which spawns in installments scattered around the map, and then fill it with fuel before taking off to the next planet, where the procedure is basically repeated. In addition, the player has to defend themselves from the planet's aliens, and for bonus points collect valuable resources which occasionally fall from above. After the first level, the rocket stays assembled and just needs refueling, but every 4 levels the rocket resets. The player gets an extra life and the replacement has to be built before it's refueled for takeoff again. It's part of the Jetman series which spawned 2 sequels, Lunar Jetman and Solar Jetman Hunt for the Golden Warp Ship. The game is playable in Donkey Kong 64, where it could be unlocked in Cranky Kong's laboratory. An enhanced remake of Jetpack entitled Jetpack Refueled was released on the Xbox Live Arcade in March 2007. This game is a classic and was the winner of the Game of the Year title at the Golden Joystick Awards in 1983. Number 4, Death Chase ZX Spectrum. Written by Mervyn Escort and published by Micromega. The player controls a motorcycle riding mercenary as he pursues 2 other motorcycles, one blue and one yellow, through a forest. Each enemy motorcycle destroyed is worth $1,000 or points to the player. The player's motorcycle is equipped with forward-firing guns which shoot its prey. The projectiles can be controlled mid-flight simply by steering the bike. If both enemy motorcycles are destroyed, the player moves to a night version of the same level, and if both enemy motorcycles on that level are destroyed, the player moves on to a daytime level of the next stage, with more trees to avoid. There are also tanks and helicopters which appear on the horizon and can be shot for bonus points. The game takes place over 8 stages. When stage 8 is complete, the game returns to the start. Also nominated as one of the best Spectrum games ever in Your Sinclair magazine. This game is another true classic. Number 3, Beachhead, Commodore 64. Developed by Bruce Carver, co-founder of video game developer Access Software, who made such classic games as Leaderboard, Raid Over Moscow and the influential Lynx golf game series. The game is set on the Pacific Ocean theatre of World War II. Gameplay consists of several stages in which the player must control various vehicles, including warships and tanks, in order to defeat an enemy fleet and break through enemy beach defences. In the final stage, you must destroy an enormous gun emplacement to win the game. A sequel, Beachhead 2, The Dictator Strikes Back, was released in 1985. A remake of the game, Beachhead 2000, was also released. The game was included on the 1985 compilation They Sold a Million, along with Daley Thompson's Decathlon, Sabre Wharf and Jet Set Willy. Number 2, Telengard, Commodore 64, developed by Daniel Lawrence and published by Avalon Hill. The single-player adventure begins by personalising a player character. Telengard is a role-playing Dungeons & Dragons-like video game. The player begins with a sword, armour, shield and no money and can see his immediate surroundings rather than the whole level. The player travels alone through a dungeon fraught with monsters, traps and treasures in a manner similar to the original Dungeons & Dragons game. The game has 50 levels with 2 million rooms, 20 monster types and 36 spells. It has no missions or quests and its only goal is to survive and improve the player character. The game is set in real time and cannot be paused, so the player must visit an inn to save their game progress. Enemies increase in difficulty as the player progresses through the dungeon. They include both living and undead monsters such as elves, dragons, mummies and wraiths. Defeating enemies awards experience points, which raises the player's experience level and increases player stats. It is a true classic adventure game, fondly remembered by anyone who's ever played it. Before we go any further, here are a few honourable mentions that didn't quite make the top 10. Attic Attack, ZX Spectrum. Hunchback, Commodore 64. Aztec Challenge, Commodore 64. Fort Apocalypse, Commodore 64. Professional Tour Golf, Commodore 64. Number 1. Manic Miner, Commodore 64. Manic Miner is a platform video game originally written for the ZX Spectrum by Matthew Smith and released by Bug Byte, re-released by Software Projects on the Commodore 64. It's the first game in the Miner Willy series and one of the first examples of what we call platform game today. Inspired by the Atari 8-bit family game Miner 2049er. In each of the 20 caverns are several flashing objects which the player must collect before Willy's oxygen supply runs out. The player must avoid enemies such as poisonous pansies, spiders, slime and worst of all manic mining robots which move along predefined paths at constant speeds. Willy can also be killed by falling too fast, so players must time the precision of their jumps and other movements to prevent such falls or collisions with the enemies. Extra lives are gained every 10,000 points and the game ends when the player either has no lives left or completes all 20 caverns and escapes to the open air. It was a winner of the Golden Joystick Award for Best Arcade Style Game by Computer Video Games magazine in March 1983. It placed third in the Game of the Year of 1983 of the same competition. The game was included at number 97 on Polygon's 500 Best Games of All Time list. Sequel to Manic Miner is Jet Set Willy and it was followed by Jet Set Willy 2. Software Projects also released a game in the style of Manic Miner for the Commodore VIC-20 called The Perils of Willy. In addition, quite a few unofficial sequels, remakes, homages and updates have been released even up to this day, including the ZX81 version. Re-released on various modern consoles including Game Boy Advance and Xbox 360. This game needs no introduction to anybody with any gaming knowledge. It's a classic. I hope you enjoyed this top 10. Please feel free to share your top 10 games of 1983 and please don't forget to subscribe to the channel.